Hello and welcome to the 2022 ARC Forum for Industry, Infrastructure, and Energy. It's really good to see non-digital faces because it has been a while. I'm sure all of you are enjoying that as well. I hope that your travel was pretty uneventful and that the forum, the 26th annual forum, so far has been productive for you. Okay, there we go. Just a note on emergency exits, if needed, straight out these doors, straight outside. It's very straightforward. So first of all and foremost, thanks to our sponsors. Before we get started, it's always important to thank you because without you, we could not have this wonderful event, and we truly, truly appreciate you. So, just if you are not yet aware, we do have an app for the forum. It will enhance your experience during the event. It allows you access to things like recently published ARC research, as well as the opportunity to network with folks, chat with folks, see who's here and who you might want to connect with. Also, we do have social tools to enhance your ARC forum experience. So please, be active on social media, hashtag ARC Forum, get involved, let your voice be heard. So just a little bit about me in case you don't know who I am. My name's Mike Guilfoyle. I'm a vice president here at ARC. I've been specializing in about 2 decades helping companies really build market and business strategies to address transformational drivers and market disruption. At ARC, I've spent my time researching emerging technologies and business issues such as analytics, the cloud, workforce modernization. I'm also a member of the Digital Transformation Council Steering Committee. That's our end-user only community of about 2,300. Sorry, no vendors allowed. Apologize for that. But I also now lead a team that deals with the breadth and complexity of energy transition and industrial sustainability. So this year we've dedicated an entire track to energy transition and sustainability, and we'll continue to do so in the future. It's a really profoundly important subject for all of us, as industries, as companies, and as individuals. And you can see here that we have a great track of sessions dedicated to it. It's the first time we have developed a specific track for energy transition and industrial sustainability, and we're going to do so moving forward. The great thing about all these sessions that you see listed here is that they're all, I think, taking place today, so do please drop into one or more of them. So I want to also bring up another additional resource for you. And you can get this through the app, as you can see here. If you just go into the app and you click on Documents, you'll see a list of documents. I believe this is like the second or third one listed. But this is ARC's vision of energy transition and industrial sustainability as we see the market now and as we see the major players involved and the issues that they'll have to deal with now and in the future. So this is the next wave of major disruption that we are facing. And digital transformation will be the means by which we successfully navigate it. So, why this emphasis on energy transition and industrial sustainability? Combined, they constitute the largest disruption of our lifetime. If we have a disruption larger than sustainability, we're talking asteroids hitting the planet, because the complexity and the length of time that we will face issues related to sustainability and transition into lower carbon fuels is immense. It's staggering, the implications of it. We know that this will be the largest disruptor, and you've echoed that sentiment. A recent ARC survey indicated that 75% of you view sustainability as the biggest business issue you will face in the next 5 years. And we know that sustainability is becoming a key component of brand perception in consumers. And they're using their wallets to demonstrate that. In turn, investment is following, with ESG risk portfolios rising as the critical determinant where money will flow. Think about this. Currently, 1 of every 3 invested dollars resides within an ESG risk portfolio. That's where the money is going. It's estimated that it will rise to $41 trillion by the end of 2025. That's a lot of money. That will determine the winners and the losers. And you have to get on board with that notion. And yet, guidance on how to be sustainable in terms of environmental stewardship and business positive performance is incredibly vague. There are a lot of notions out there. There are very loose frameworks, but not a lot of specific guidance on the actions you can take to quantifiably measure and demonstrate that you are not only improving your sustainability performance, but also your business net positive performance. That's a very difficult path to have to follow. So, that brings me to our keynote and how leaders in digital transformation approach innovation to help them navigate these market disruptions. They're prepared to be able to adapt. So I think as many of you who were in the room yesterday morning know that we released our ARC Industrial Digital Transformation Top 25. That was the first look at what we view as market success in terms of leaders in digital transformation. It was our intention specifically to spotlight some of the leaders that excel in integrating digital transformation into all areas of their business so they can fundamentally change how they serve their markets and customers. In our panel today, we're lucky enough to have 3 of our top 25, as well as a 4th company that was referenced in the report. In our discussion today, we're going to touch on 4 key areas related to leadership and digital transformation. The first is market signals. So how market leaders understand their customers and markets, and they use that to drive competitive excellence through business transformation. Market signals. In addition to those, software and digital tools. So how do you use software as a business strategy to differentiate yourself versus your competition? People and knowledge. As everybody knows, this is near and dear to my heart. Why digital transformation is a battle for talent and expertise, and the implications of that on organizational makeup. Talked about it all day yesterday. The workforce of the future, what skills we need. People aren't showing up. You can't transform if you don't have the right talent. If you don't understand what it needs to be, you don't identify that, and you don't go secure that. So that's what we'll really hit on today. Market signals, software, people and knowledge, and their use in running the business at the speed of machines. That's the key. You have to be able to transform what you do so that you can address the market through software and digital tools and better problem solvers, so you are faster to respond versus the competition. Whether it's market disruption or customer needs, that's the end goal. So, with that in mind, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Mike Tomasco from Pfizer. A couple things about Mike. If you have a chance to sit down with him, whether it's over coffee, beer, do so. He's an incredibly affable guy. He's really, really funny. But the thing I like about him, he can also drop incredibly pragmatic wisdom on you as to how to navigate digital transformation. He has seen it all, both good and bad, and he has pushed his company to innovate through the very messy journey of digital transformation. He understands how to think through the process. And the great thing, the unique thing about his perspective, in my opinion, is he very much understands the top-down vision and the bottom-up vision and how to bring the two together. So, without further ado, Mike Tomasco.
Thanks,
sir.
Okay, thank you for that introduction, Mike. That was really kind of you, and you set the expectations really high for humor, so thank you for that. And so with that, I guess I'm proud to be number 11 on that digital transformation list, but I prefer to be maybe in the top 10, so maybe we can eke our way forward, and by the end of this conversation, I can convince everybody that maybe we're moving up that list at a rapid pace. So first, a disclaimer, I have to do this. Anything I say, please don't hold against me or my company. This is my personal belief and opinion. It has nothing to do with the company, yada, yada, yada. We'll move on from that. So a little bit about me first. I started my career at Accenture. It was Anderson Consulting at the time. And from a background perspective, I have a chemistry degree. There's a bunch of engineers in the room. Every time I meet somebody, especially there, they'd say, "Oh, chemical engineering?" Nope. 2 math classes shy. Did not get a chemical engineering degree, couldn't hack it. I was pre-med and wasn't going to do that. But I learned a lot of fundamental things at Accenture that I still hold with me today. And it's all about the teamwork that's created there and the kind of the constant learning that you go through as you go through your career and build your skills out. I never had a deep competency. I worked in a lot of different industries, industrial equipment, chemicals. I know BASF is here. I'm sorry for your SAP system, likely my fault. I was a conversion expert on your program in 1997, so you're welcome. I'm sure you're still living with those issues today. I apologize. But I learned a lot there, and at the bar, if you want to learn about database and referential integrity, I will explain to you a lesson I learned when I was 25, working at 2 a.m., and maybe deleted an entire database by mistake. So, well, I guess I just told you. And then throughout that journey, I started to work more in the pharmaceutical industry. I worked at Pharmacia for a while. In the Web 1.0 days, I worked with marketing and sales, and it was really interesting. And then I got into merger integration work when the web crashed, and I had to reinvent myself. I reinvented myself as a corporate finance person. I thought, what skill set is always necessary in a company that won't get you fired? Finance, debits and credits and closing the books and all that. So we were helping Pharmacia upgrade their SAP system. Pfizer came along, bought Pharmacia, took out SAP and put in another system at the time. So I helped lead a reverse ERP implementation, which is pretty challenging. And that's what got me to understand a little bit more about manufacturing in the biopharmaceutical world, because my main job there, from a technical architecture perspective, was to connect all the manufacturing systems into this new, let's call it legacy finance system. and I built a lot of relationships there. And that moved me into a position of working with pretty much the person who has my current job back then from a strategy point of view. And at one point along that journey, several people asked me, if you have so much passion for this business, because I'm a very passionate person, why don't you join the company? Well, that coincided with when my twins were born. And I was like, I live 10 minutes from this place. Maybe I should work here forever and not get on a plane every week. So that started my Pfizer journey. It's very practical. And started off working with the engineers. I supported engineering for years in different capacities. I see some friends here from BMX in the front row. Nice to see you guys, Sam. We did a lot of great work. Over time, in 2013, there was a shift in the organization. And something to know about me, I always raise my hand and do something that maybe is a little bit different. I take on more. The concept of lean in, I think, is a big leadership thing. It works for everybody in a corporation. You can always raise your hand and take on more work, and people will gladly give it to you. So they were forming a strategy group at the time, and I said, ooh, I want to go do that. I want to do something different. And we did some really good foundational strategy work, a lot about enterprise core solutions. Oh, by the way, I'm a digital person, an IT person. I apologize in front of all the engineers and OT people here. If there's any digital people in the house, oh man, 4 people. Okay, we'll change that in the future because a lot of this is about working together, right? And kind of getting over our cultural issues between IT and OT. It's a as we talked about over at the table, it's a battle every day, in a good way. So as we're going along with the strategy, this will lead me a lot into the story. This job that I have now didn't exist. I was offered a job at one point on the journey to lead, again, like a manufacturing IT function. And I said, I think at the time, and I'll get into this a little bit later, there's a different path forward. This digital transformation, this was in 2016, it's a thing. It's bubbling up in the industry. We need to figure out what this is. And the person I worked for at the time said, after thinking about it, that's a good idea. Let's try to figure that out. So that strategy function started to morph into a digital transformation organization. Started with one person, then it moved up to 10, 20, and so on and so forth, which is really kind of cool. So we have a lot of experience in this journey, and hopefully some of these stories will be relevant to you. I do want to set some context about Pfizer. Usually when I do this, some people don't even know what Pfizer is. I think that's changed over the last 2 years. So our purpose, breakthroughs that change patients' lives. So over the last 2 years, this has never been more important and really a driver of everything we do in the company. Human health was at stake. We all have to get together and move the ball forward. And I have to credit our CEO, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, when he came in, really changing the culture of the company, and that's what we're going to see here. So courage, excellence, equity, and joy. These things are foundational to how we behave. We shifted from what used to be called an own it culture of trying to build ownership in things, and it was really important because we were going through a time of constant pressure to downsize. We're shifting towards this growth mode, and this is before the pandemic. It's the courage to try to think bigger and to do things that you don't think are typically possible. Execute everything with excellence, of course, you gotta do that. Equity's become extremely important, not just inside the company, but more about access to medications at reasonable prices. That's something they're taking a lot of steps towards. You might have read something last week in the news about that. And then joy, that's my personal favorite. I like to have fun with my team and in general. So it is always good to celebrate the work that you do. We spend a lot of time with each other in person or digitally, so it's always good to make sure you enjoy what you do. This is just a prelude into the next slide, really. What's important to me on this slide are 39 manufacturing plants and the 125 countries where we distribute products for patients. So let's talk about that. 1.4 billion patients reached last year. It's a tremendous honor to play a small, small part in that machine, in trying to make more medicine and really think about who in your life takes some sort of product that can benefit from that, whether they're managing a disease state, trying to cure something, or prevent a worldwide pandemic. It's more than 1 out of every 6 people on Earth. It's staggering to think about. Now, from our manufacturing and supply chain side, what's important to me on this one is the 39 sites, and then the number where it says 30 plus legacy companies. Many of you are OT people. We build plants with the flavor of the day, right? We're in our own company. When we start to combine companies, standards are tough. You layer in standards over time, but if you have that 40-year-old piece of equipment that runs and works, you don't mess with it because it runs and it works. And that creates some of the challenges that we run into with digital transformation. The other thing that's interesting to me on this, although listening to people yesterday, people have way bigger number of plants and all that, but 615 products in the 18,000 SKUs. Each one of those combinations of product and SKU needs to be registered in every country you distribute and sell it to. Imagine the regulatory machine around that. So you would think that if something's approved in the US and Europe, it just kind of goes everywhere else. Absolutely not. That's not how it works. You've got to go to every country, do all the same due diligence. Every country has different requirements. That creates a backlog of issues back into manufacturing, because if you want to make a manufacturing improvement, quite often you have to re-register the product in every entity or market that you sell to, and that takes time. So it slows us down sometimes. So let's talk about some lessons in leadership here. I chose some very non-controversial digital type leaders that everyone loves, a few billionaires, and maybe one guy that people do like. But I did this for a reason, because all these people inspire me personally in different ways. Let's talk about Bezos and Amazon. I love Amazon. And I don't know about the guy as a person, but boxes show up to my house when I need them. Or I just bought a book when we were sitting at the table over there because somebody recommended it, and it'll be there when I get home. The important thing about each one of these, they all have different thoughts and sayings, but Bezos with his, if you're looking at your competition, you're never going to drive yourself forward, right? If you focus on your customer and listen to your customer, that's the important thing. If you're looking sideways, you're going to kind of get stagnated and taken over most likely. Musk, not controversial at all. But his point on the bottom, a lot of us, we all work with continuous improvement, right? That's what he's talking about. And that's fundamental to our operations, is always challenge yourself. How do I think? How do I do things differently? How do we improve this? What data and information do I need to make that decision? So that's something that's driving me all the time. Steve Jobs, he inspires me a lot. Like, he wasn't the nicest guy in the world, so they say. I don't know him personally. But I actually have a picture of him on my phone and my son next to him doing the same thing, and I split screen it because one day he was wearing a black turtleneck and he has those glasses. I'm like, do this for a second. And I use that as inspiration of my family and then somebody I admire what they've created for the world. So I do find these interesting. Customers don't know what they want until we show them. I've run into this. I'll tell you a story about that. Because a lot of us talk about, oh, listen to the customer. Yes, that's true, but they don't always see the future. They don't always know what they need, and it's our job to help them get there. And then it takes a lot of hard work to make something simple. We run into this all the time, right? Our screens that we create for people to use for operators or for us lab technicians are so convoluted. Any software providers in here? Please do better. Right? Especially on the operational technology side, it's literally the worst, right? And I know everyone's working on it, but you got to work harder and you got to work faster. That's what we need to be successful. We build a lot of our own software. So Satya, the nice guy on the page, right? Every company's a software company. Now, a couple different people have said this. He said it most recently in a big speech that he gave. I find that is so fundamentally important to understand. Whether we're working on the shop floor, in a lab, in a quality area, in management, every single thing people are working on has a digital component to it. That means there's some kind of data and software involved in helping serve it up. We talk a lot about AI and machine learning, and that's all great, but we got to get the basics right, we have to get access to it, and then we have to understand what that customer needs and wants and drive them towards some sort of vision. And in thinking that way, thinking about software, I've been building an internal consulting and software team. I want to be the consultant of choice for Pfizer Global Supply. No offense to any consultants. I used to be one, as we saw before. But I know more about our operations and our processes than outsiders do. And I think you all do, right? Everybody in this room has that same knowledge and understanding. And it's blending what your partners bring to the table with your knowledge that drives the change. But I would say, especially with analytics, creating your own software is actually your competitive advantage. Because I heard yesterday in one of the sessions, if everyone does the same thing, we're all doing the same thing. So how do we differentiate? A little bit about Dr. Albert Bourla. He wrote this book called Moonshot about the creation of the vaccine. I read it. It's fantastic. It's a great story about what was really going on, some of the things he was thinking when he was meeting with different governments and things like that. I find it fascinating. So you can probably go to Amazon right now. Bezos would love it, and you could order it and all that. And I have a little, it's hard to see maybe, but the little lucite thing back there with a bottle of vaccine. It's not real vaccine, but you know what I mean. Part of the team that helped do this. So thinking big makes the impossible possible. When Albert came into Pfizer, I mean, he was there, but when he was elevated to CEO, his philosophies, this think big, it just married with my own personal philosophy so much. I'm the guy in the company that goes, yeah, yes, he gets it, I get it, we're aligned, let's go do this stuff. I always have this thing, like this value curve, and like if you shoot for halfway up the curve, you're gonna get half of that. But if you shoot for the stars, which is what he's all about, if you get halfway to that, that's better than you would have thought. That's what your original goal was. It's all about helping motivate people to do things they don't think are possible. He is a true believer in that. Now, the other side of that is now he thinks we can do this all the time. So that's another challenge. But I think it really is important to strive to do big things because it'll make progress happen. In chapter 7, manufacturing, the second miracle, let's give it up for the engineers, for the OT teams, for all the process scientists that had to come up with something that worked on a benchtop and create billions of doses of a vaccine quickly. Something that's never been done before. Messenger RNA production scale vaccines were never done before. They invented equipment, they invented processes, they invented process control, all this stuff to make this happen. So as they were doing that, my team, a lot of us were off on the sides like, how do we help enable that? How do we help enable this ridiculous growth curve that we're gonna see in the amount of production? The one quote here, this is a little self-serving, but on page 86, and expanded use of our digital operations center, which is Pfizer-developed digital platform, enables our supply operations. What he's talking about there in the context is, when we had the lockdown like everyone else in March of 2020, we had a system that we've developed. We actually have some patents pending for it. That's, in essence, it's a lean production system that's been digitized. By the way, that doesn't exist either. It's something you can't buy. There's pieces of it you can buy, but the whole package you can't, so we built it. And that started in our 2016 time. In 2016, we had a president of manufacturing back then who said, being good isn't good enough. You have to be better. You have to do more. And he challenged every function in manufacturing and supply and the enabling functions, procurement, HR, finance, and IT. What can we do differently? So at that time, our lean production system was actually born. We call it IMEX, Integrated Manufacturing Excellence. And it's a paper-based process. We would go teach people to put paper on walls and do your standard work and your visual management and your continuous improvement. We would have CI specialists run from place to pull the paper or the magnets off the board and collect them for use in understanding and analysis. And then we were over here on the side doing the wrong thing in digital, or IT, right? We were playing with drones. We were playing with AR, VR. Like, people are going, what are you doing? We don't need that. Okay, the customer was right. We still did that stuff, but we stopped talking about it because it created some value. Drone can fly up. You can have an IR, infrared camera on there, and you can see steam leaks and stuff like that. That's good. But what we started to do is listen to people. And we saw this paper-based process, and we said, what year is it? At that time, it's like 2017. We're like, why are we using paper? So we did a lot of design-led thinking sessions, user experience research and sessions. I employ a pretty sizable user experience team to understand the struggles of the operator or the supervisor or the lab technician, the quality assurance person, the management team. And slowly we started to understand what was necessary here. If we join up with this lean production system and we create something of value, people will want to use it. So we do all this design-led thinking stuff, It's pretty cool. Applied for some patents. Like it's cool and useful. That's always good. And the first plant we were partnering with to go live, I still remember this. It was March in 2018, I think. And we go there thinking, okay, we're going to go live in 2 weeks. This is the final review. We've done all this design-led thinking, user interaction. We show up, and after that week, all the people in the plant were like, we're not going to use this unless you change these 34 things. It's like, oh my gosh, 34 things, that's crazy. So we go back into our little IT hut, and we talk about this, and we say, well, what's it going to take to do these 34 things? And the initial response was, mind you, it's March. I think by September we could do it. Oh man, that's not going to work. I actually took out my phone as a daily stand-up meeting. We're agile, and I'll talk about that in a second. I took out my phone, swiped the calendar back. I said, June 15th, we go live. Everyone's jaw hit the floor, and I think I was maybe a little bit more animated when I said it as well. And I gave that speech that you give to people to make them think they can do more than they can. I knew they could do it. It might not be perfect, right? Perfect is the enemy of good and all that. But you give that speech and say, you guys are all going to remember this. This is a story you're going to tell your grandkids. When some crazy Pfizer guy forced you to work your tail off to do something that wasn't possible. And guess what? We went live July 4th. I didn't think they would hit June 15th, but if I let them do September, it would have been December, because that's how human nature works. People work to the time scale given to them. A lot of people in the organization may be perfectly happy showing up at work, hanging out, doing their thing, and going home. That's not in my DNA. I don't think that way. It's more the Musk thing. You gotta constantly be doing better. Probably blame my dad for that, in my psyche. I'm never good enough. So you gotta constantly be doing better. So that's something that we were able to do. And then this quote is about the fact we had rollout plans for this digital operations center that were about 2 years per plant because of, people are busy and all that. The pandemic hits. We actually have a picture of this. It's not here, but I have a picture of an operator all gowned up in his stuff, a wall of paper, right, in one of our plants, a tripod with one iPhone, an iPhone in the other hand. He's talking to a supervisor who's not allowed in the plant because he's not essential. And they're looking at the standard work plan, and there's an issue. Then right next to it, I have our optimized for the Microsoft Surface Hub, thank you Microsoft for Surface Hub, Digital Operations Center, where they have all of this data digitized, and they have, at the time it's Skype, now it's Teams communications going on with people from home, from the hallway outside, because they don't have to gown up and go in. And the efficiency equation on that's ridiculous. The ability to escalate issues from the floor to supervisors to management is instantaneous with a loop back. It used to be the person walking around carrying the pieces of paper. And this was all something that was invented out of a necessity no one asked for. Nobody asked for this system. We saw a need and we tried to bridge a gap, and it took a long time. So we can learn a lot from that in the rest of our digital transformation. So now I put myself in the middle. It's a great looking slide. So my team's vision: simplify processes and experience to drive PGS outcomes, Pfizer Global Supply outcomes. It didn't start off that simple as a vision, but it evolved into this. Because if we're not answering that question every single day, how am I helping someone? How am I driving a real outcome? Then we're probably doing the wrong thing, right? That's something to remember. These are all things that I say based upon input over years, right? So our strategy is rooted in practical reality. Now it's time for hyperscale. So as Mike said, I do see things from top down and bottom up. In the beginning of our journey, we did a lot of pilots. Things didn't work. If you want to talk about things that didn't work, that's the bar conversation. I'll tell you exactly what we did wrong, how we did it wrong, and how you can avoid that pitfall. Big data lakes, failed. Have it now, but we failed originally, and a bunch of other things. So we now have, we're 6 years into this, we have this capability set that we can now hypercharge our operations. So we're currently changing my team structurally to take advantage of this. So instead of being solution-focused, that's my timer. Instead of being solution-focused, we're now focused on transformational unit. We used to deploy things individually to like the path of least resistance, who wanted to take it. Now we're looking at it strategically and saying, okay, the operations here need 40 different systems to do their job. Well, that's a problem in and of itself, but how do we transform that operation holistically and make a big difference faster? The next one, listen to your customer. They know what they need until they don't. Very true. No one needed a digital operations center. Nobody asked for it. Nobody needed this other system that we created called Batch Tracker. In fact, somebody told me I was an idiot for coming up with the idea. The basic gist of a lean production system is you look at the past and you do analytics and you come up with continuous improvement projects and you make improvements. Well, that was good for a long time, but if I understand the past, I can triage the present and predict the future, and that's what that thing does. It's a cross-functional system to say, it answers the question, where's my batch and what's holding it up? And it brings people together to say, what actions can we take to go drive that outcome to release that batch faster and improve throughput and flow? And it didn't take off until one of the leaders came in and we were presenting it to him, and he goes, why isn't this everywhere? And I pointed to one of his team members. I said, because that guy doesn't believe in it. So he put that guy in charge of it, and things changed. It's a lesson in leadership, right? Like, okay, now it's your responsibility to roll this out everywhere. And reluctantly, eventually, the guy became one of the biggest champions, right? It was a personal journey. It's a personal curve. The bottom one, do something. If it doesn't work, try something else. I had that written on my whiteboard for years. We're constantly facing issues and problems. Just do something. Not making a decision is the worst decision you can possibly make. You've got to make decisions. Go for it. If it doesn't work, pivot, change. Who cares? Just don't spend millions of dollars doing it. Structured agile is so much better than agile. Okay, so that story I told about the Digital Operations Center and the 34 things, we were following agile and sprints and all this. It didn't work really well because we weren't structured enough. We now use SAFe, or Scaled Agile Framework. It's a game changer for us. It doesn't work for everybody. It works for us because we're a regulated industry. You can't just work willy-nilly and release code. It doesn't work that way. You've got to test it. And then what we realized was our rule set, our SOPs for how we had to qualify software didn't work with Agile. So we raised our hand and we said, we'll rewrite the rules. And basically, we just codified how Agile worked and said, if you do this, you're compliant. Game changer. Don't like the rules, rewrite the rules. And then you just have to find the right quality person that goes, oh, that's a good idea, because they don't usually do that. And then every problem is easy to solve until proven otherwise. Sometimes problems are proven otherwise pretty quickly. That's just a thing. Because people get faced with issues, and sometimes they get bogged down. So as a leader, you have to portray that positivity. It's almost, I call myself chief cheerleading officer, right? Because we're trying to do the impossible on a daily basis. That's hard. It's so hard, and people get upset and bogged down. You gotta try to help them break it down and just say, it's not hard, it's easy. And then they come up with something and you go, ooh, that's hard. But then you work through it together. And then I'll just end with this, since I'm like 20 minutes over, sorry, Mike. Do good work. So I end every team meeting with that phrase, do good work. A lot of us get emotional and bogged down in politics and relationships, and somebody's out to get me, or they don't understand who's they. But at the end of the day, if you just do good work, eventually it's recognized, always. And for us, it's recognized through continued investment in our partnership with our business customer. And that helps us drive those outcomes. It helps us simplify those processes. Because if we weren't doing good work, they wouldn't fund the work we were doing. So with that, thank you very much. And I'll turn it back over to the panel we're going to introduce.
Thank you, Mike. I think you get a sense of why I like to talk with him so much. Great guy, lots of knowledge. So I'd like to introduce the rest of our panel. We have Jeff Walsh from Intel, if you want to come on up. Mike Carroll from Georgia Pacific, and Jeff Kent from Procter & Gamble.
Great.
Thanks.
Has everybody noticed that we get the chairs that look like they're going to launch us out into the crowd versus yesterday?
That's if you don't like the answers, I will feed them to you. So what I'd like to do is, Mike, you gave us some background on yourself. We'll start with you, Mr. Carroll. If you can just give us a little bit of a background, who you are, what your role is, what your company's done relative to digital transformation, what your area of focus has been, where you think you do well, where you think you need to do better, and perhaps what you think is next. If you could just each give us a few minutes, that'd be great.
You said just a few minutes, right?
I did, yes.
Yeah, my bad.
Yeah.
There's no clock up here, is there?
Oh, and before we go, now this is weird. When I was putting this together, it just happened this way, and I realized Mike, Jeff. So I don't play cards, but I understand that's a really, really good hand that we've been dealt. So
Full house,
completely coincidental. So Mr. Carroll.
Yeah, so my job is not to do things for people, right? My job is to get people to believe they want to go do it for themselves, right? So if that's not your job, it needs to become your job. You need to get people to believe they want to go do it for themselves. And so the reason we have been successful has started with humility and my hind end in one of those seats. And so 2 years ago when I was here sitting on this stage, I looked out across this crowd and it was a sea of silver. Today it's not quite as much a sea of silver, right? Which means that the crowd is transformed. And that is a really good thing, but it also means much of the crowd needs to know what to go do. And that starts with humility, right? And I was that humble person in the crowd, albeit my hair was darker at the time. And I was sitting there looking at this guy at the time. And it starts with the question of what to go do. And that's where we were. What do we go do? And you're only as good, and this is what we got right? We asked the right questions. We asked the right questions from being here, right, of Mike in this group. What do we go do? And he said, well, who do you hang out with, right? Who are the vendors that you work with, right? And I'll use names because names are important, right? If you can't tell who you work with, right? Names are important, right? Who do you hang out with? Who do you work with? Who are your non-competitive peers that you hang out with, right? Do you know what good looks like? Do you know what your problems are, right? So go figure out what good looks like. So people like Andritz and Honeywell helped us figure out what good looks like. Now, Mike helped us understand what our problems were in context, right? And then non-competitive peers. And the reason that was important for us is that when you think about your size and trying to do this alone, in that space, when you're 10 times larger as a group, you're actually 18 times more innovative because of something called the adjacent possible, right? And the adjacent possible just allows you to be that allows you to be so much more innovative across, because you don't duplicate experiments, right? And that ability, you're only as good as the people you play with, and that allows you to be so much more powerful, so much quicker, and so is folks like Owens Corning, is folks like Intel, right? And so you're only as good as those folks you hang out with, and that's why you're here, right? It's the people you hang out with that matter. And so if you're not out asking those kinds of questions, if you're not engaging folks like Mike, right, and Mike, and Jeff, right, and you're not asking the right questions on how to go get better, and putting the problem in your context, and that's probably the greatest lesson that you will get. If you look for the easy button, I promise you will fail. I promise. And you will do it over and over and over again. If you copy somebody, it's like handing somebody a shovel, right? And start digging your own grave, because it will not work, because other people's context does not work for you. And that's the lesson that Mike Guilfoyle taught us.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jeff Walsh, and I lead a team of manufacturing IT for Intel of about around 1,300 people worldwide. And our responsibility is, it's kind of where IT and OT come together. And what I mean by that is we're responsible for starting up our factories from an automation perspective. The factories at Intel are fully automated. They've been fully automated for many years. We've been developing and perfecting the automation for our high volume manufacturing for many, many decades. And the reason is because it's a capital spending intensive business. And so it's required to get your return on invested capital. In order to do that, you had to provide a lot of automation in order to run the factory 7x24, 365. So this digital transformation, has gone on for us for a long time. And we have today, where our factories are fully automated, what we call lights out automation. We have a remote operations center at each factory that sits outside of the clean room itself, and people sit there and just watch what's happening. And if anything does happen that the automation, has any kind of problem, they're there to step in and through software, make any kind of assist they need. And if it goes beyond that, well, then they call my team, and my team gets involved, and we help the factory get back up. But so we're responsible for running the factories, because the automation runs the factories. And we're responsible for running these factories at a very high availability and very high performance. So from a digital transformation perspective, you'd probably say to yourself, well, gee, you're done, aren't you? You've fully automated your factory. You've got everything where software and physical automation is being run in these factories, and what do you do now? So we still have a lot to do, and what I mean by that is, Mike Guilfoyle talked about it in his intro, is that while we're fully automated, and while we're also responsible, my team's also responsible for developing software solutions that help the factories overcome their challenges with respect to line yield and die yield and tool availability and tool utilization and labor efficiency from a factory perspective. We do all those things, and we use all the technologies, machine learning, IoT, advanced analytics, AI. We do all those things. The problem is that, as Mike said, we're not doing it fast enough. The learning turns for our engineers in order to deliver the kind of output performance, deliver the kind of quality to hit the cost targets we have, that helps the company from a gross margin perspective, because manufacturing is the biggest spender. So we have to move faster, and that's where our focus is while we do all these things, we're still working on overcoming the challenges of what sort of slows us down today. And so there's many things that are in the automation architecture that are old and that need to be modernized. And they need to be modernized because they can't keep up. They don't scale. With the growth that Intel is going through right now, the cost and the speed at which we need to scale, what we do today is not going to deliver the outcome in the time frame that we need it. So that's been our focus area.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jeff Kent from Procter & Gamble. I'm responsible for an organization that's called Smart Platforms. It happens to sit in our product supply engineering organization for the company. It entails a set of priorities that started 4 years ago, how to bring practically machine learning and AI to our process and equipment assets. In addition, I'm responsible for our industrial controls and automation discipline across the company. So you could consider the 500,000 resources that are doing industrial controls and automation, and then trying to extend those equipment areas into machine learning and AI. So, if we as a company have a stated constructive disruption strategy that includes data, digitization, and machine learning, that's extended across our product supply activities from fulfillment all the way down into manufacturing. My team has had to solve this important obligation of how do we bring machine learning and AI to our manufacturing culture, to our manufacturing assets, and do it in a scalable way. So, what has been obvious for my group and the partnership in the company is it's one thing to go solve a use case, and then it's another thing to be able to provide a scale set of solutions that every plant can take that journey of being confident, being able to explore data, being able to use every equipment area as a part of solving solutions. Some of the most important successes we've had has been in what I would call the digital quality assurance area. We have obligations, just like Mike spoke about from Pfizer, on regulated products, but we also have products that aren't regulated that we've had decades of success in superior quality assurance. However, they need to be transformed into digital quality assurance, where we sample not just so many products that we're making at thousands a minute, but every single one of those products being tracked on the data, on the method, and using machine learning and AI to do that. So the journey that we've been on has been very informative for me. As I said, I've led this group for 4 years. I'm an OT guy by heritage, but I also feel that the IT-OT convergence has been both positive and sometimes negative. I spoke yesterday about the obligation to what I call free the OT, right? And what I mean by that is two very distinct messages. One, depending on the heritage of the equipment or the heritage of your OEM, the ability to get to that data, contextualize it, make it a timestamp, make it available to the machine learning exploration is a very complicated set of activities, from the level of mastery of the people working on it, the maturity of your OEM, the maturity of the site that's taking that on. We've been able to offer products and services that simplify that at a very affordable level. The partnership that we have with manufacturing QA, our supply network organization, is very important because everybody in the company is on some stage of this maturity. So, I think the success in P&G is still born out of early success and needs to continue. And, the discussion I'd like to have today is, how do we partner with the key partners in the company? How do we bring practical products and solutions that can scale? Because I don't think it's about solving problems anymore. We've proven that we can do that. But how do we offer to our large and mid-sized companies the ability to scale with an ecosystem that makes it simple and that everyone can participate?
Thank you. And I do believe we have some folks running some microphones, so if you do have a question, we'll get a microphone to you. So just raise that and be patient, please. So let's start with this based on something you said, and see if we can offer some fairly practical advice. You mentioned the need for your solution providers to do better. You said, do better, do it faster. Those companies, the people within them, are under immense pressure in terms of the competitive markets in which they reside. So let's dig into that, because I'm sure all of you have had that experience of, well, we need things to work for us this way. But let's break that down into a little more practical detail. And we'll start with you, Jeff, at the end.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think we benefit as an industry and as a community with brilliant providers, vendors, startups, technologies, and solutions. What I've seen work the best and the companies that are going to succeed the most is applying, something that Mike referred to earlier, which is human-centered design. I think if you're going to bring a solution, you have to have an engagement model that your software, your application, your scalable solution is first and foremost human-centered, right? Who are the personas that this application are going to serve? What's the data you're going to harvest, contextualize for them, and stay 100% committed to that human-centered design process all the way through its life cycle. So I've been very pleased in my recent travels over the last 6 months dealing with some of the industry leaders and emerging startups that the concept of delivering a system through the human-centered design principles is their engagement model and is their delivery model, which is very, very different than what I experienced a couple of years ago. So I think my encouragement is if you're delivering or trying to deliver use cases or digital transformation, human-centered design and its principles should be your commitment as the leader, and you should be finding partners who have an engagement model throughout the life cycle to stay committed to that.
Any additional input there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the other side of it too would be, in terms of selecting suppliers that are going to help you be successful. I think you first really need to understand your own business very, very well. Your business acumen, the depth of it, the breadth of it is so important. We've experienced, we have a long history of going off and choosing technologies, looking for a place to apply it, and just getting sort of excited about staying on the technology edge and then trying to, back it into a problem that we have in the company and hopefully it helps solve the problem. So we've now, turned that around, and we're doing a lot more about really understanding our business use cases, understanding our business really well, and part of that understanding it's a partnership between your revenue generating business units and your groups, your functional groups that are helping the business groups with those problems. It has to be that kind of a partnership. It has to be a commitment there between the two to really understand. Mike talked about it before about, what do you think you want versus what you really need. It's that partnership that helps strip away what you think you need and gets down to the real most fundamental pieces to understand what's going to work for the company and make it successful. And then you can go out and choose the right technologies and then partner up with vendors that would join in this use case development and solution development piece to get you to the right place. So I guess that's kind of the other piece that I would, in addition to Jeff's comments, that I would advise as well.
So this is really easy, right? Because we got a full house, and you can either say Mike or Jeff, and be right in either case. And
couldn't have planned it better.
And so what you just heard was bottom up, top down, right? And the top down piece is the vendors really need to understand that we're changing. Our companies are going from the way we used to be, which is we used to use data in silos. We're not going to do that anymore. Everything has to be interoperable, and I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you what you need to hear. We're not going to tolerate it, right? And so all the end users aren't going to tolerate it. And the reason we won't tolerate that is because in order for us to be competitive, we have to create value at the rate that data grows in order for us to be competitive. Why is that true? Because all the major technology companies have already shown that when you go create value at the rate of data grows, that's called exponential. You become an exponential company. You become a different kind of company. And I know you know this, right? Because you guys see it. right? And so the bottom-up user interface experience stuff combined with this idea of interoperability from a data perspective allows us to go do that. Without that, none of this works. And it's all the stuff in between with the data interoperability that makes that work. And there's a bunch of stuff that has to be worked out, but that's what you just heard.
You said it, so you
Can
get
I
to...
can I take that one step further, because that was great. First, I was applauding you. Thanks to you. But I would go even further. So here's the mistake every single startup seems to be making. I invent a sensor, right? And then I want to provide you a SaaS-based cloud solution to use with that sensor and do some kind of analytics. I don't need that part. I need the sensor. I need this ecosystem connected. We are very heterogeneous as entities. As soon as I get beyond 2 or 3 plants, your solution doesn't work for me. It doesn't scale, and you're also charging me like, it's crazy how these models.
And
work.
I can't afford the exposure, the architecture where the data goes to you first and then back to me. I can't afford
own
that
it,
exposure.
Right? Yeah. So that's just advice, I think, from a business perspective. The more open you are, as Mike was saying, open APIs and interoperable, you're going to win. That's how you win. And if you're one of the big industrial companies that we all use, the more open you are, because it all started as proprietary. This open automation thing is amazing. And I think that's what we have to strive towards.
I think, though, in fairness, that's not an environment in which the providers are learning too. They're coming from an environment that has a very traditional way of selling into the market, so they're trying to understand how to adopt to your requirements as well. So
I think it's a polite way of saying we're part of the problem. I agree.
yes, I'm saying that. Yeah, I think it's definitely a challenge.
That's fair.
And again, questions along the way. Looks like we've got one over here.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
So this question is directed to Mike at Pfizer, but it's actually applicable to all of you. Mike, Pfizer's visibility in the world has grown exponentially in the last 2 years. You're doing one of the most important things on the planet. But my question is, has that drawn increased cyber attack towards your company? And what are you doing about it, if true?
Yeah, okay, so that's probably something I can't completely talk about. You could imagine that the answer is probably yes, right? Like increased attacks, but that's actually not my space. So I'm going to have to defer that to our Chief Information Security Officer.
But I think we can safely say that, tech companies, many companies are getting, attacked every day, 7 by 24. It's the volume of the attempts, has grown exponentially. I work very closely with Intel CISO, and it's a battle every day. I wouldn't want. I'm not interested in his job, just because there's things going on all the time, and they're up. They're up in the middle of the night. It's just nonstop. So it's definitely been very strong in terms of the amount of attacks that are happening on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think from P&G's perspective, the answer is yes. There's greater threats and maybe a greater obligation. We're going to create more and more investments in this enterprise reference architecture that connects IT and OT, and more devices, more cloud environments. And the good and bad news in Procter & Gamble is we have a process we call iRisk, which every production application, every production infrastructure must go through that process to be introduced into our manufacturing and supply operations. As an engineer and innovator, it's not necessarily very popular, but necessary. So I think, as a community, as we bring more and more solutions, more and more connectivity, more and more intelligence, that is part of the design consideration, and it's been formalized inside of Procter & Gamble. We also are investing in a zero trust defense program. As we try to invest in our OT, we also have to clean it up. I think for many years we had a lot of organic solutions being developed, a lot of architectures that only served a small value, not a scale value, and also created probably more risk. So very, very hot topic inside of Procter & Gamble. A lot of very bright people, including members of my organization, working together with IT and OT to clean this up and to take the next step towards a resilient system, yet still providing value protection and value creation.
Yeah, I mean, I could say the same thing. Last couple of years, we have a number of projects that have been going on over the last couple of years in that space, Jeff, and it's still ongoing. A lot of cleanup, a lot of extra lines of defense going on that's active every day, things we're doing.
Looks like we have one in the back.
Good morning, Elliot Bell, Radix Engineering. Gentlemen, you talked about the expanded data systems and the expanded data capabilities, and I applaud you. I do believe that until we get the true capabilities out of instrumentation, because a lot of instrumentation and analyzers have many more points of data than we actually extract, we will be held back. But none of you have spoke yet to getting exponential growth in the human resources that are actually adding to the solution set. Could you speak to that part? Because if we're only relying on a small number of people to try to be innovators, we're always going to be constrained. So how do we get a greater number of employees in the organization contributing to the exponential growth?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're trying to do. When I said that at Intel we're not moving fast enough, we're not scaling in terms of speed and cost. What I mean by speed is we're on the journey to do just what you said, is that we want to make all our engineers at Intel a community of value generators. As you said before, right now we're being throttled in terms of the pace of innovation, the pace of solution, the pace at which we can get our learning turns in by having those engineers sitting on the sidelines waiting for a digital transformation group, an IT group, whatever, to build solutions that they need in order to solve their problems. Instead, we want to give them the platforms by which they can go and solve their problems themselves, and give them all the tools that they need to move at the pace that they need to keep up with the pace of the business, and they're becoming that community of value generators. That's what I mean by the speed side. And then on the cost side, what we don't want to do is do it the way we've traditionally done it, which just is adding more solution developers, which costs us more, and continue to be throttled by the pace, being throttled by the number of solution developers you hire and pay. We'd rather limit it and have the community of engineers solve the problems, be value generators, and use the software engineers, if we were solution developers, to work on the more difficult problems, the cross-organizational problems, the deeper problems, the endemic problems, and have them work on those things. And the combination of it, I think, will allow us to achieve our cost competitiveness, or our scaling in cost, and our scaling in speed. That's the direction we're going, and we're on that journey now.
Maybe from a Procter & Gamble perspective, I think this is a very important topic, that we're in the middle of a renewal, or I might even call it a transformation. I think the demographics for our what we call E&I community, or power controls and information systems, is at a critical point. We have a number of those resources that are reaching maybe the potential end of their careers, and we have a new generation, and we may have a canyon in the middle. So we have we might call a burning platform of capability and people we've got to solve. And then we have this new obligation of how will those same people extend into the new obligation of bringing intelligence to life in those assets, and the new generation of people that we're hiring that are data engineers, data scientists to blend. So I think we have a transformation that we're bringing all the way up to our product supply officer of the company. We're even changing the name of the discipline. The discipline has been called Power Controls and Information Systems. I know I joined that group 24 years ago. I'm kind of uninspired by the name, and we're going to introduce it as Intelligent Controls and Automation, which combines the heritage with the new obligation of unleashing intelligence from those same assets. So I think you're making an unbelievable point, that we have this new obligation, and the next generation and the current generation being upskilled and hiring a blend of different roles, not just electrical engineers, not just hardware engineers, not just motion control engineers or process chemical engineers, but those being combined with data engineers and data scientists, and then upskilling those who are still with the company as a part of this renewal. So we see the same thing that you're speaking to, and it's going to be a long, hard journey to get that to be as healthy as it needs to be for this obligation.
So I have a question down here.
Yeah, Ted Connell with Blue Skies AI. I'd like to follow up on that question we just had. Mike, as you were talking about early, we have sustainability vectors hitting the industry. We have environmental vectors hitting the industry. We have, cultural issues coming with the demographic shifts. And now we have new toolkits with AI coming in. How is that going to impact the culture with all these change vectors hitting your companies? And now, the marketing, if you talk about what Hollywood talks about AI, people are afraid of it. They think it's going to replace them. They're confused with the Terminator and consciousness as opposed to mathematics and AI, what it really is. How's that going to hit your business? How are you going to manage that cultural shift?
So, I think that's a great question, and so I think it starts with the problem, just like you described, right? And so, the real problem most of us face today is right at the plant level. Am I going to have enough people to run my plant today? Am I going to have enough raw material to run my plant today? And if it breaks, do I have enough spare parts to fix it? Right? That's what's going on every day in our facilities, right? Every day, that's what's going on. And so, in the midst of that crisis of today, what we're trying to do is we're trying to pull ourselves out of that, and we're trying to say, how do we solve this for tomorrow when we know that the employment crisis demographically is not going away? So, strategically, automation, right? We have to change differently how we think about employment, how we think about how we get knowledge to the front line, right? We have to think, so I'm trying to lay out this problem for everybody, how we get knowledge to the worker at the same time that all of manufacturing is experiencing turnover in a yearly basis at a rate it's never experienced before, and that's likely not going to change in this coming decade, right? So now I got to be superhuman at learning and development in a way I've never been before, right? So now I got a problem I've never had to solve in a certain way before, and how do I bring all that together? And you said AI, right? And so let's throw out a term we all hate, big data. How many folks in the room have clean data? Anybody? Nobody. All right? So let's just give up on clean data, right? It's just never going to happen, right? And so we need to really crisp about what has to be proximal to the equipment. We all have to solve that. We also have to acknowledge that automation is what we're going to have to live with, a high degree of automation. And this is why interoperability is so important, right? And the data freedom is so important in that interoperability, because us manufacturers, we have to orchestrate. The only people who can orchestrate is us. The only things that can orchestrate is AI, right? And it's not correlation-based AI. You can't have that much clean data to do correlation. You're going to have to do knowledge-based, first principles AI, right? And I'm probably telling you, everybody sitting here going, what in the world is that, right? And so the world has been doing this knowledge-based AI for a long time. It's not came into the industrial world, right? And so the industrial world's been doing traditional data science for a long time that's correlation-based, but there are a few companies like Parable, they're here, right, that do knowledge-based AI that is causality in case you're wondering, if you know who Jadair Pearl is, right, you'll understand what causation is. And out of that, what happens is you have a way of doing orchestration, right, through automation and delivering real-time insights to employees at the time they need to know it. So you think about it in these 4 ways. What is it I need to know? What is it I need to know that I don't know? Because without that, you can't prioritize anything, right? And then what is it I'm in control of? And what is it I'm not in control of that affects me? Because that context at the front line in the plant is what people need to know. Because the reality of it is we've been delivering a bunch of templates to them and things they don't need to know. And green is bad. And so you don't want to give them a bunch of things they have to interpret. And so we live these lives where things are delivered to us every day on our phone that give us these insights, right? And that's the kind of insights we want to deliver to our employees that are task-based, proximal to the equipment. And then the layer beyond that, which is the technicians, right? Those are the folks that will help with the situational awareness. So you'll be kind of bimodal, all delivered through an AI layer that helps you orchestrate and deliver insights to employees, right? That is the world we're all going to live in the near future, and it's not the insidious type of I'm coming in artificial general intelligence way, right? It's the way that we will build the future in a different way that makes us all way more successful. It's orchestration, but we have to have interoperability of data in order to make it work. That's why OPAF is so important, because you have to be able to orchestrate all the way down to the DCS level. Does that answer your question?
The other thing I'd add too, just simply when you talked about culture, I said it before in terms of understanding your business, deep business acumen. It's our experience has been in terms of people getting over the fear of using these new technologies, and you probably know this, right? Is that the more you can partner with your business partners and show them what it really means practically, it removes the fear around, this might take my job, or this is going to move me into a place that I don't want to be doing that type of thing. The more you uncover the problems together and realize what the solutions are, rather than stiff-arming you, they'll be more saying, hey, can you bring more of this in my way, because I can do things that really allow me to apply my talents more than just some of the routine stuff that I have to do as part of my job. So that partnership is key.
Yes. Dashboards are the fastest way to yesterday, by the way.
Yeah, and I find it interesting because when you talk about this shift in AI, you accomplish 2 things at once, which is you're letting the AI allow you to run the business at the speed of machines, but you're also in parallel collecting all of that IP, all of that subject matter expertise, and organizing it and amplifying it in a better way. So I believe, do we have a question out here?
Yeah, good. Hello. Good morning. My name is Nathan Hoisington Shaw with Owens Corning, and Mr. Tomasco, you talked about, you got too many mics up there, but you talked about having to deal with hundreds of different governments and whatever iteration of the FDA they have. I'm just wondering, through your digital transformation that you've gone through, what value have you found from a compliance standpoint, or help meeting the multicultural demands of a global company?
That's a great question. Thank you. And Mr. Tomasco, I think, was my dad, but we'll go with it. So as you start to transform all of your end-to-end processes into data-driven processes, so if you think about how R&D transitions its data into manufacturing and then the regulatory space, there's a lot more you can do from a sustainable nature of creating documentation from the data versus writing documents. I would say, honestly, we're very, very, very early in that journey. We do have a partner that we're working with to help us on that journey. It is a forward-thinking partner, one that data first is what they think. It's completely open, all these things we've talked about. Because what that allows us to do is use that information that we're collecting, or the data we're collecting, in different contexts. So one would be pushing it into this regulatory process to say, here's the required data sets we need in document form. You can do that automagically, right? And then from a product transfer perspective, from R&D into the scale up of manufacturing, we need the same data sets, and then we need to build upon them, and then they need to get into the actual manufacturing process. So we are starting to see that shift, but I'm going to say it's going to be a couple years before we get there on that one. Because anytime you cross that boundary in our world between R&D and manufacturing, it's just, there's a lot to work through. So change is slow, but it's definitely coming.
Maybe to build off Mike's comments, we have something similar. I've been talking most about our operational intelligence. We also have an innovation intelligence mission coming from my group in partnership with R&D and what we call our seamless technical community. Just as Mike spoke about, we have machine learning and AI ways to look at spec generation. So instead of it being just an R&D product developer creating a specification for a regulated product, we have this system enabling them to make sure that specification has all the proper information and that it's consistent with previous specs and others. So I think, as Mike said, we're in the early part of that process with key partners that are enabling that sort of informed innovation intelligence activity to streamline that innovation process into manufacturing for our key master data and specification. So those two worlds have to come together to drive the efficiencies.
So just one quick thing to close. I'm going to paint three realities, so just bear with me for a moment and then just have each of you perhaps address it. So reality one is that you have been moving for a while through digital transformation, modernizing your businesses for digital economies. And that means that you are shedding a lot of the practices of the past, and you are moving towards autonomous operations. And that also means that you don't need as many people to run your operations as you used to. That's reality one. Reality two is that you have, as has been discussed here, a change in how people work. Not only with people retiring, but also having to bring in new people that you can't train fast enough if you can get them to show up. Mm-hmm. And then the third reality is you have this looming impact of ESG goals and sustainability. So just want to put it to each of you as a closing comment. How do you manage? Two of those three realities are difficult, much less all three combined. How are you going to do that? What do you think is the key?
I suppose I go first. I think that it comes back to, for us, just to do something, right? You can't be paralyzed by the fact that these things are all happening at once and they're concerning, they're hard. You just have to work through each one. Everything's easy until proven otherwise, right? So you like think that way, and then you break it down into its components and say, I need to work with people. I need to get them trained. I can bring in VR. Like, there's all kinds of things you can do to address them in pieces, as long as you have an overarching strategy that is going to get everybody aligned towards trying to hit all three of those things at once.
So making sure you're addressing at least each one of the three components that I've...
And then make those step changes along the way.
Sure.
So I don't know the answer, but I do know that my grandfather told me that show me your friends and I'll show you your future. So I'm going to go back to where we started with humility. And I'm going to hang out with you more.
That's good.
Right?
I like that.
Because it got us here, right? I'm going to hang out with my peers more and try and forge a way through this.
Yeah, so as we also used to say, skiing is never ski with skiers that aren't as good as you. Ski with skiers that are at least as good, if not better. Yep. Jeff?
Yeah. I mean, right now for us, it's simply, hanging on to the people, the talent we have, because again, those are the ones that understand how the business works today. They understand what the problems are, the opportunities, where we need to go, so we need to retain them. And then it's supplementing additional talent, bringing in talent for where we want to go. We know the pieces that, we know some about the pieces that we're missing. And the hard part for us will be integrating them in to be able to, deliver that kind of collective intelligence that gets us to the state that we talked about earlier about where we want to,
Sure. So make
ultimately
sure-
we're trying to get to.
Make sure that you have a very specific strategy for talent identification and retention.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we've got that going on today, but then it's going to be tried, as
Sure.
Mike talked about, to see, does it deliver the outcome you're looking for? And, we'll make mistakes along the way, but we expect that. And then in this new world of a way in which we work, when you talked about will they show up, our company, I'm happy that our company is taking a policy that's very flexible, so we can pursue talent, and it doesn't have to be in a particular location, and shoehorn them into a geography that maybe they don't want to live in or go to or whatever. And so I think that's going to help us worldwide. And time will tell, but I think that's the right way to go.
Sure. Jeff?
Yeah, I guess I would close by saying it does begin and end with a really clear articulated strategy that an ecosystem can participate in. And what I mean by an ecosystem is both an internal and external ecosystem. So internally, your people, in most cases, are so in tune with what really needs to be done once they understand a key strategy and listen to them, how they want to evolve their own skills, evolve their own contributions, and evolve get their own thoughts into that, how that strategy can be executed. But equally important, this industry has an unbelievable ecosystem that you can lean on. And I've learned that just in the last year. I think coming from the OT, we're used to buying technology, components, solutions, and software and implementing it. The world is completely changing in this industry where many of the companies here or our partners are not only offering technologies and products and software, but services and solutions and staff augmentation across the globe that we are tapping into to supplement and push our internal teams to be better, our internal teams to work with their teams. So there's a broad ecosystem that if you're not tapping into it to drive your strategy, not just on the technology, but on the people and the talent. I mean, we're going to share talent back and forth between Procter & Gamble and our partners and push each other to keep building our talent ecosystem and to be able to share it. This is no longer a industry where we should just be buying technology and solutions and then going back into our own ecosystem. This is a very emerging collaborative ecosystem that is the way we're going to deliver those key strategies.
So Jeff's and Mike's, thank you very much. Fascinating discussion. Audience, thank you very much.